You're listening to Contesting Wrestling, Minisode 11, where we got a fucking double-size Minisode. It's like a macro Minisode. Don't think about it. Don't try to do the math on that.
We're reflecting on regular episodes 11 and 12. 11 was about screw jobs. 12 was about Shawn Michaels. And
those two are connected somehow.
They are. Shawn Michaels being part of the most famous of the screw jobs, yes. The one that occurred in Montreal.
In the future, of course, we will be going back to the simpler one minisode per regular episode formula, but because we had to observe the passing of the year and such, we missed some stuff. So
I was in Seattle. Evan was in...
I don't even know. I don't even know where. Oh, I was in Amish country for Christmas, and had the fucking best ice cream I've ever had in my life. Yeah. At a dairy.
They do know how to churn.
They do. Yeah. They do. You get to go and look at the cows and reflect on how weird industrialized farming really is.
Yeah.
Doc, you've had some experience with the Amish.
Well, no, but I certainly dressed up like an Amish guy for several years at Johnny Rods' WUW. That was a ton of fun.
I'm shocked.
Well, I don't have any actual experience with anybody who's actually Amish, but I didn't have.
But Simon's really Amish, right?
Simon's been Simon McGee, the.
Oh, that's right.
For years now. Yeah, he hasn't been Amish. I always figured I didn't have to convince the world that I was Amish. I had to convince 150 people who most of them were like Puerto Ricans from Brooklyn and the Bronx that I was Amish. And I did that very well.
Which meant that you didn't have to avoid buttons.
No. Well, I had the suspenders and the hat, and that's really all it took, and the beard. I don't know. Johnny Rods took one look at me and he said, "You're going to be the Amish guy." And I'm like, "Yes, Johnny, I'm going to be the Amish guy." And he said, "Oh, that's good. You said yes, because everybody says no, Johnny, that's dumb. But I like you. You say yes." And so I was the Amish guy. And when a guy gives you when you've never had any matches and a promoter gives you a gimmick, just do it. It's good practice. Even if you think it's stupid, do it harder.
In the tradition of the great Amish roadkill of ECW fame.
I believe he was still active at the time. But, yeah.
Hey.
I can't be ripping off his gimmick. Neither of us are actually Amish.
So, but, you're a wrestler. I mean, if you get to a certain point where you can start calling your own shots, that's one thing. But especially when you're starting out, right, you're an actor.
Yeah.
You're handed a script.
You do the part.
You play the part. Unlike some people, allegedly... Bret Hart is who I'm referring to. And so the first thing I want to talk about, he has recently commented on people like myself who have raised the theory that he was actually in on the Montreal Screwjob. And he denied it. He said that anyone who says that it was a work are either idiots or are just trying to get a rise out of people.
Well, they don't give too many idiots. They don't give too many idiots the advanced degrees that you have, but
not too many. It happens.
It happens, I suppose. Well, you'd know better than I. You've met a lot.
Oh, so you're smart at one thing.
Yeah,
congratulations.
Well, I am supposed to be smart at like figuring out what's true and false. Maybe
there is that.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's what this is about. But
in the time since we recorded the Montreal Screwjob episode, just based on what more I have learned about wrestling in the time, I would say I am not a truther. I would say I lean more towards Bret's side of things, only because I feel like it would have required a conscious effort on the behalf. It would have required a conscious effort on the part of the creative team of the WWE to we're going to make a decision to elevate the level of meta-ness. I feel like it would have required too much creativity on the side of the WWE. I still think there's maybe something could have gotten fucked up and they were just trying to roll with the punches or something. But.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I'd say in response to that is if you watch the year of the WWF leading up to that, that does seem to be where they're going already. We pointed out, or I pointed out in the premium episode that was the complement to our first episode, that when you see the previous Survivor Series, the interaction between Bret Hart and Vince McMahon looks a lot like foreshadowing for the Screwjob. But hey.
Well, Vince, became quite a character himself as they started just sucking him in. It does seem a little too good, but, I mean, it's also just
Look,
wrestling, man.
I will say, as a good intellectually humble skeptic, that I'm certainly not sure by any means that Bret was in on it. I just think that it's not... I wouldn't be so quick to believe the story that they're telling us.
Well, for so long, the question was Shawn in on it? And Shawn denied it until he stopped denying it.
I will say about Bret's recent comments that they don't hold up very well in terms of being an argument for why you should believe that he wasn't in on it. So the main things that he said are, one, that, hey, ask The Undertaker. The Undertaker was there. He'll tell you that I wasn't in on it. And first of all, Undertaker is another professional liar like everybody else in wrestling. And two, he could have just not known. And Bret's like, oh, yeah, when I confronted Vince McMahon, it was in front of all the boys. Everybody saw it. I remember exactly what happened that day. Again, none of that contradicts him having planned it with Vince McMahon. The second thing he said was... he's like, hey, it would have been great if this was this big plan all along for me to come back and finally fight Vince McMahon. That is actually what happened.
Yeah, there's no way they could have planned it out like that, though.
No. I don't think that I'm not saying that was the plan. I think more likely what the plan was that eventually he'd fight Owen.
Right, eventually he'd fight Owen. Owen would eventually become the WWF champion, and Bret would come back like, nah, man. I'm the guy.
I think we can all agree that regardless of all of the theorizing, of all of the insane stories people have put forward over the years, we all know that Bret was responsible for 9/11. No further questions.
I'm not going to argue that point.
Yeah. It was Canada.
It was Canada.
It's always Canada.
The Canadians and them Nova Scotians were looking this way.
All right. As we're talking about the realness or
of
lack
Canada
thereof,
doing 9/11
of anything, I want to bring up. So in this episode, Evan referred to a upcoming graphic novel written by Aubrey Sitterson. It's actually illustrated as well by Chris Marino. I was given this graphic novel as a birthday gift. I just turned 35 this last December 21st. And it is called The Comic Book Story of Professional Wrestling. Thank you very much, Anessa, for the gift. It is an absolute treasure for any wrestling fan. It is a great compliment to this podcast. I'm only about halfway through it, and I have learned a ton about the history of pro wrestling, the early days of pro wrestling, lucha libre, puroresu, British all-in style,
Toots Mont,
just filling in a lot of gaps in my knowledge, clarifying some things that we've referred to that I'm going to have to bring up again at some point because now I know a little bit more about it. Just a couple of things. They do talk about the Gotch-Hackenschmidt rivalry. Frank Gotch and George Hackenschmidt, which was over so Frank Gotch, the original world championship of wrestling. And what's really cool about that era of wrestling is it's totally unclear to what degree it was booked and to what degree it was real.
Around what year was this?
1908 was their big famous match.
Wow.
Yeah, they had the rematch, I think, in 1912.
Yeah.
So around then.
Yeah, where Hackenschmidt complained of Gotch being too oiled up and headbutting him and things like that.
Things that would get you disqualified in the UFC today, I might add.
By the way, you can blame George Hackenschmidt for inventing the bear hug, introducing it to wrestling.
Oh, I'm so bored by the things that you have caused, George Hackenschmidt.
while we're talking about inventions and the Montreal Screwjob, the sharpshooter, Bret Hart's finishing hold, plays a huge role in that. That was invented originally by Japanese wrestler Riki Choshu. And I had seen him use it before, but I did not realize that he was actually the originator. And give me a second, I'll tell you what he called it.
We are going to have to do a book club this year, I think, where we read this. We have to read Mankind's book.
Oh, Have a Nice Day. It's fantastic. I'm showing Evan a picture of George Hackenschmidt. He's the kind of guy that you'd look at him and think he's clearly on steroids until you realize that picture was taken in about, 1910? So before anybody was doing anything like that. He was an incredible strongman. An Estonian.
Oh man, it's the shape that some old timey strongmen were in. Like I can't. Like if you see like old pictures of Charles Atlas, like I've still never seen anybody look exactly like that. Like,
interesting thing about Hackenschmidt too, he was well versed mainly in the Greco-Roman style of wrestling, which is a little bit more conservative than the catch-as-catch-can style that was eventually introduced and combined with it. And so that was another, he was playing this role against Gotch where he was the more traditional kind of conservative kind of wrestler. So that played into the story that Gotch was cheating. And another really interesting thing that Sitterson talks about.
This is a picture of Gotch. He's not quite as impressive looking, but he's wiry.
Still, he looks scary. I'd be scared of him.
Another interesting thing that Sitterson talks about in the history of wrestling, especially with Lou Thesz, is that you'll have this character, the kind of shooter character, who can wrestle for real and has a much more realistic style, who will often make it out as if wrestling used to be real.
Right.
And now these guys that I'm fighting, they're a bunch of fakers, but I'm real. And this is a very common sort of gimmick and storyline that was employed in the early days of wrestling and continues to be a thing with guys like Brock Lesnar.
I heard that. I heard that when Sin Cara first came to the WWE locker room, he tried to tell everybody there that his matches were real, and they laughed and laughed and laughed. Like, no, they're not. We know how they're not. You don't do moves that can be done in real fights. Yeah. You don't do a tilt-a-whirl 360-degree head scissors into an armbar in a real fight. It's impossible. The other guys have to help you.
And it's weird to say that to a room full of wrestlers who are just like, yeah, we know how this works, man. Like, are you like? I was wrestling in the secret league with real fights that none of you have heard of.
You're not. You don't go to a bunch of gambling hustlers and be like, oh, I'm just lucky. Like, we know you're not.
I get into real wrestling fights all the time with this league in Canada that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
They helped plan 9/11.
So, by the way, Riki Choshu's sharpshooter was called the Sasori Gatami. Also, another thing that I kind of knew about, but I wasn't sure when we talked about Lucha Resu, Tiger Mask was really the first Japanese wrestler to go train in Mexico.
Okay.
And so he really did have a Lucha Libre background.
The original Tiger Mask.
The original Tiger Mask, yes.
Which there have been 4.
A character that I imagine was the basis for
6, actually.
6?
Well, including Kota Ibushi, he had that recent thing. And,
a character that I imagine was the basis for the 2 wrestling-themed episodes of Steven Universe, where the main character portrays a wrestler named Tiger Millionaire.
That's pretty good.
And then, if you watch them, even like as somebody who doesn't necessarily know a lot about wrestling, watching them, they are very clearly big fans of wrestling.
I hear it's a good show.
Oh, it's one of the best shows of the 20th century.
Also, I didn't realize the original Black Tiger was Rollerball Rocco.
Rollerball Rocco, really? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Lots of great information, insight, and gems, and it's a very entertaining read, and the illustrations are absolutely beautiful and really convey the moments in wrestling that they are meant to represent.
Give us the name of the book again.
It is The Comic Book Story of Professional Wrestling by Aubrey Sitterson and Chris Moreno.
Cool. We should tag them somehow in this.
Yeah. I have a whole post ready that I'm gonna.
Good. Social media.
I was gonna do after we did this.
Yes.
All right. Other
Some of these
things.
sweet retweets. Sorry. So Shawn Michaels.
So I just watched the movie Inside Out, the Pixar movie, for the first time.
Man.
And you know how they have like those childhood islands of psychology that are built? I was thinking like Wrestling Island is one of my main things. Yeah. And it really reflecting on that film, you know, the contrast between Doc and I, who grew up watching wrestling and have Wrestling Island and our appreciation for it, and you, Evan, who haven't, like, I don't know if you'll ever quite get to that.
It'll never really 100%. Yeah, because there's a level of things with nostalgia, or especially that level of like the childhood nostalgia, that you can't successfully recreate that. It's like the same kind of thing as like you can stay a fan of music for the rest of your life, obviously, and consistently get into new stuff. You are never going to bond with anything the way you bonded with stuff in high school. Like it's never gonna, no matter how much you love stuff you find, it's never going to like sear itself into your psyche in the same way. And like it's why, you know, I feel like a lot of the general frustration that people experience in our generation with pop culture and media, and maybe how sometimes people our age can get a little too upset about things not working out quite the way they want to, or get way too into things, is because of that constant search to try to recreate that feeling that you had as a child, and the fact that like it'll never really happen, and like it'll be like, I don't know, like I watched the Dark Crystal series on Netflix, which came out, which was great. I thought it was really well done. It was really entertaining, like a great kind of like YA sort of like story structure. It's not going to make me, there was like part of me that felt like almost disappointed that it didn't make me feel the way that the movie did when I was a child, because of course it's not going to, because when I was a child it was just this like this journey of of sensations that I could like had no frame of reference for, that I can't describe. And now I watch it and it's like, oh, it's you know, it's a well-made movie that looks cool with an okay script. Like,
and that no frame of reference thing is huge, right? It was the first time you had seen something like that. I don't know what movie it is, but there's some old guy who's like, yeah, you know, everything I experience now just reminds me of something else that I saw before. And the older you get, the more that's going to be the case.
That's when you're young, you value originality so much, but really it's just something you haven't seen. And as you get older, I think, and this is a wide generalization, I think you value technique over originality, because you realize how little is actually original, not because people are bad or unoriginal, but because everything's been done. We've been recording everything anybody has ever farted out for over 100 years. There are only so many ideas.
I mean, think about how many times, you know, that you have been talking in, you know, a group of people of mixed ages about something that you really like, and then a person of the generation between 1946 and 1964, you know, whatever they're called, might come out and say like, well, that's just a bad version of this. Like, I don't know, this happened to me recently. I just watched Midsummer, thought it was a fucking great movie, posted something about it on Facebook, and this guy that I know, who this is very much in the habit of what he often posts on my Facebook, was just like, oh, like that's just like a you know, child's version of The Wicker Man. Or something like, or like, you know, if you say like, oh, like I like this band, like, oh, well, that was done better at this time, and it's always like, yeah, dude, and that shit that you like, that was just a dumb version of some shit that happened in the 20s, and that was just a rehash of some shit that happened in the 1860s, and it goes all the way, it never fucking stops. The Greeks wrote all of this place, and they were just ripping it off shit that we don't have records of.
And
you know?
I mean, but I have made this point before. It could be that shit has just been getting progressively worse, and will continue to get worse. Like everything is just a shadow of some earlier thing that was better, but really, in a lot of ways, not. There's a lot of really shitty things about those things in the past that have been shed since then.
Only the most memorable stuff is the stuff that remains. So it always seems like whatever's happening now is worse because we haven't separated it yet, and it takes a long time, really, too.
Well, and we're in the middle of all of it happening. You know, like we remember all the great stuff from the '60s because we're not there in the middle of it, where it's like,
Right.
oh right, the most popular band in America is Herman's Hermits.
Right, for
you
a
know,
few weeks.
Yeah, like, and that, you know, because that stuff doesn't last. We
Yeah,
forget about all of the terrible movies that came out during that period of time.
Right.
You know, like,
Herman's Hermits was the most popular band in America for a couple of months in 1964, after the Beatles were getting ready to stop for a little while, but before they put out Rubber Soul and recaptured everyone. And there you go.
So on that note, talking about Shawn Michaels, you know, homoerotic undertones aside, as we discussed, which I was not conscious of when I was a kid, though they were likely there to some degree. I mean, I started watching wrestling and Shawn Michaels when I was 8, and I wasn't thinking consciously about sex in any regard. But all that aside, I thought Shawn Michaels was the fucking coolest person.
Oh, yeah.
And which really didn't do me any favors in junior high school when I showed up in my motorcycle cap, heart-shaped glasses, and red fingerless gloves.
Oh, man.
And so my whole conception of masculinity was sort of weird.
Oh, yeah.
Coming out of wrestling was Shawn Michaels. There was a little bit of Bret Hart. I thought Diesel was kind of cool, but a lot of it was Shawn Michaels. You know, and he got all the girls too, and
well, that was that. There's that whole period of the late '70s through the early '90s where it was this weird, hair metal is the ultimate example of men who are simultaneously coded as uber masculine and also dressing very feminine and acting in ways that are considered effeminate or homoerotic.
I kind of wish more super masculine icons could do that now.
Yeah.
This was the late 90s that I was adolescent, and
the WWE was a little behind the times.
Right, and so apparently was I.
But it is, I mean, I do still wonder, if I have a bit of a tingle watching this, as somebody who still has generally lived a life as a straight guy, but if I'm conscious of the fact that has to play an unconscious role. All of wrestling, really. I think because I was also thinking this watching the Women's Royal Rumble, right? Where I was really trying to figure out the line between so are they still more sexualized than the men? Because they're still
some of
them definitely are. Some of them definitely came out and seemed like they were embodying a character that was more overtly sexual than you ever see from any of the male characters. But at the same time, the men are definitely, there is a sexual component to wrestling that I don't think you can get away from, and it has to play somewhat of a subtle role for the fandom.
Even in some sublimated kind of way.
Absolutely.
Because we're not sitting there, men or women in the ring, with boners.
No, of course not.
You know,
I will also say,
explicitly sexually aroused.
Fandango comes out and just stands there with his legs apart and pelvic thrusts a bunch.
Oh, and the New Day? That's Big E's whole thing.
That's Big E's whole thing is my dick. And fine, great. Big E should actually be the champion now, but that's another story entirely.
I don't know about it. Sexual feelings aside, I think I might have had some romantic feelings. Yeah. For the whole "Tell Me a Lie" Shawn Michaels thing. I sent you that music video a while ago, Evan.
I don't remember. Oh, I should have watched.
You should watch it.
Okay.
At some point, Shawn was injured, and there was this cheesy fucking music video, but it made me so sad that Shawn Michaels. It's "Tell me a lie, say that you won't go."
Oh, it was so bad.
And back then it was I'm really sad that Shawn is hurt. Watching it now, I'm like, this was, clearly a romantic thing.
Well, and it's also because, it's hard when you're a kid and you have idols and stuff like that. And it's hard to if you know that you're weird, right? And that even if you, even growing up, even if you're still if you're, a straight cis male and you're not necessarily having and you're not having identity issues in that way, but you still know that you are not society's conception of masculine. You have no I never felt any meaningful connection to that in any way. I always felt very alienated by it. Didn't understand it, and it was hard to find, and it still is. It's hard to find guys who are who are able to break out of that. You know what I mean? We're still presented with this choice where it's like, you have guys that are either like, there aren't a lot of great role models for straight cis dudes who like, where like that's still who they are, but also they are not enslaved by traditional masculinity.
You have guys like Prince. You
Yeah.
have guys like David Bowie. I mean, for me,
both of them are dead.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, right. You had them. I never identified as bisexual or anything like that. I identify as a straight cis male as well. But the fact that Bowie was bisexual in that way was always very cool to me. And I admired that, and just I was never very interested in the like typical male, American male
Man
masculine
stuff.
Yeah.
man stuff.
None
that
of
kinda
us are
guy.
like football fans. I'll watch it at a bar if it's on, but I don't like care.
The ability to step out of traditional masculinity and still like be a guy, you know what I mean? Like the fact, like being a guy who is still like, I don't know, it's an archaic phrase, is in touch with your feminine side.
Yeah.
There is I'm a straight guy, but as I've gotten older, like that gets fuzzier. Not because I don't think anything has fundamentally changed about me, but I think just like you start to understand that there is like a wide definition of what constitutes sexual or sensual or erotic.
Completely.
And then like also, as you get older, like I am like, I guess I'm like a cis guy, but also like I have no attachment to maleness or that concept. And I think that if you're straight, you're still a little bi, or still a little just through the nature
It's
of
a
being a human
spectrum.
being.
It's
Yeah, through the nature of being a human being
Just
and being able
like
to see
sex in terms of like male female is also a spectrum. Right, so it's got to be right. If that's a spectrum, then sexual attraction sort of has to be as well.
And there is always going to have to be an element, just like watching physically fit people be intimate with each other, whether in wrestling or anything.
Is very intimate.
It plays into that lizard part of your brain.
Yeah.
In some way, shape, or form. And I just, one of the things that has been consistently interesting for me in this podcast is really trying to discern what role that plays, because it has to play a role. I don't think it consciously plays a role for anybody really, except maybe like bookers telling the girls to act sexier, which luckily that is happening less and less and less, and people are just able to bring whatever level of sexuality they want to the ring, be it a high one or a low one, whatever. I think it just it has to play a role.
I think there's something to Freud's idea that everything we enjoy from an aesthetic level is to some degree a sublimation of sexual attraction. And I mean, he probably is overly reductive about it and went too far with it, but there's, I think, a complex story you can tell tracing back things we appreciate to some kind of erotic element.
At the risk of drifting into hacky stand-up territory, I mean, it is kind of disturbing when I really think about it, how if you dig deep enough into all motivations I've ever experienced for any reason, it's pretty much all been to attract a mate, right? Like
it's very animal.
I can't remember who fucking said this, but I feel like this like quotes like I like became a person largely because I heard that women liked people.
That's pretty
right.
good.
Like I like develop like, I mean, sure, I guess some of my personality is inherently born out of my interests and shit like that. But like in terms, like a huge part of why I like learned how to cook and learned how to like deal with my emotions as an adult human being and all this stuff wasn't out of any sense to responsibility of society or a desire to further my own material gains or anything. It's really at the end of the day just because I was like, oh, I should make myself more attractive to people. Now that is a massive oversimplification, everything I just said. Like obviously we all have complex motivations, but like it's a fucking huge part of it.
But it's really worrisome because in some cases when that motivation is very overt, you get guys, you get people who become sexual predators where the only way they can continue to live and do things and be productive is if they're constantly making new sexual conquests.
Yeah, where they
It's unhealthy.
exactly where it becomes a game, a scoring system, something like that.
Right.
Or then the flip side where you wind up with like incels because you have people who are like, well, I'm doing all of the things that I'm supposed to do on paper, right? And I'm still not attracting anybody. And I deserve somebody, so therefore I'm going to act out in an extremely destructive way, either through internet harassment or fucking shooting people. Good. I didn't mean for this to go there. So, but yeah.
That's where it goes. It's where the conversation goes.
And this is a tangle of issues that is not easy to.
No.
Oh, we don't have
work
solutions.
through
It's
at
just
all.
we all think.
God, just like look at what fucking Shawn Michaels' sexy boy persona has done, where we're just
He's
all
just a sexy boy.
he's just a sexy boy, and yet here we are
He's
in
not your boy toy.
deep in the weeds of our own identities.
Wow. I mean, I don't know where to go from there, really.
I have to get going
All right.
myself.
All right. Well, a lot to reflect on in this
Yeah.
macro minisode. Thank you, Kurt Angle, for liking our post about episode 12
yeah.
on
Yeah, that's
Instagram.
great.
Oh man, that was
I
a
mean,
big deal.
I don't know if you listened to it, but you probably didn't. But
If you did, I'm glad you liked it.
yeah, and come on the show. That would be
Yes,
really
that
cool
would be
for
great.
us.
That would be really amazing. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, we've gotten a like from Kurt
We
Angle.
promise we won't crucify anybody.
Right. Nobody.
That as Raven did to the Sandman in ECW.
We got a like from Kurt Angle, and we got a like from Jim Ross at one point, right?
Yeah, he's very active
Yeah.
on the Twitter.
Nice.
Yeah.
And one from Gabe Sapolsky, though I kind of
Yeah.
fished for that one.
Hey.
Hey,
That's
it
fine.
counts.
Counts.
So our next episode that you're gonna hear, let's see, what just came out was the NJPW.
Yeah, Nakamura, Ibushi, and Nakamura Styles
So
came out this week, and you'll be getting a premium episode complementing that very soon. But first, the next premium episode to come out is the long-awaited Shawn Michaels versus Hulk Hogan.
yeah,
I know several
yeah.
of our listeners have wanted to hear us talk about that.
And we
so,
we get right into it. It's quite an event.
and then this upcoming Monday, you will hear the episode where we're gonna delve into some more TNA matches, and we will watch what has now become pretty much my favorite match that we've watched for this program thus far, which is Samoa Joe versus AJ Styles versus Christopher Daniels at a TNA.
At Unbreakable.
There we go.
2005.
2005. So if you have access to the internet, go watch that. Obviously you do. How would you be listening to this otherwise? Go check that
Good.
out in preparation for hearing about it. My name is Evan Burke. You can follow me on Twitter at Evan Burke, etc.
None of you are really twittering troglodytes. I came up with that phrase, not Mauro Ranallo. I just want to have that on record.
Very good, Professor. My name is Doc Diamondfire. You can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Diamondfire. It's at Dr. Diamondfire at me.
I am Dr. Ben Abelson at ScribeBen on Twitter and Instagram.
And then you can follow the podcast at Contesting W. And you can follow us on Instagram at Contesting Wrestling Podcast. And if you really like what we do, you should check us out on Patreon. It's $5 a month, and you get at least one bonus episode a week. We hope to bring you more bonus content in 2020, but you're definitely going to get at least one extra episode a week. And yeah, hell, I mean, I don't know, join for a month and then quit. If yeah,
know,
that's
like,
yeah,
Join and binge.
yeah, I'm cool with that. That's it. Really helps us out
Really is.
and frees up more time for us to do this, and eventually we'll be able to buy nicer equipment and all that shit. Thank you. You guys are the best. See you soon.